In a dramatic escalation of tensions between state and federal authorities, California Governor Gavin Newsom has mobilized more than 800 additional law enforcement officers to Los Angeles in response to unrest triggered by the federal government's recent actions. The move comes in the wake of President Donald Trump's controversial deployment of National Guard troops to the city, a decision that many local leaders have criticized as illegal and inflammatory. Governor Newsom's announcement on June 9, 2025 reflects a growing crisis in Los Angeles, where protests erupted following the federalization of the National Guard. Chaos is exactly what Trump wanted, Newsom stated, emphasizing the need for a coordinated effort to restore order. The surge of law enforcement resources will include 640 officers from the California Highway Patrol (CHP) along with deputies from neighboring jurisdictions, all aimed at ensuring public safety amid ongoing demonstrations. The California Highway Patrol is deploying 5 special response teams comprising nearly 400 additional officers to assist the Los Angeles Police Department (LAPD). CHP Commissioner Sean Dury reiterated the agency's commitment to community safety, stating, "We are working in full coordination with our local and state public safety partners to ensure a unified strategic response." The unrest in Los Angeles is largely a reaction to the federal government's actions, which have been described by state officials as a blatant overreach. Governor Newsom has publicly condemned the president's decision to deploy National Guard troops without state consent, labeling it illegal and immoral. In a social media post, he called for the president to rescind the order, arguing that local authorities are best equipped to manage the situation. As tensions simmer, Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass has also voiced her concerns, highlighting the local mutual aid agreements that have been activated in response to the crisis. The LAPD and local law enforcement continue to effectively respond, she noted, thanking local agencies for their support. However, Bass warned that the presence of federal troops could exacerbate the already volatile situation, describing it as a recipe for pandemonium. The protests have not been without violence. Over the weekend, the LAPD reported the use of tear gas and rubber bullets to disperse crowds, resulting in multiple arrests for vandalism and violence. Some community leaders like Perla Rios have called for legal representation and due process for detained immigrants, as the protests have largely centered around immigration enforcement issues. "What our families are experiencing is simply a nightmare," Rios stated, encapsulating the sentiments of many demonstrators. In light of these developments, the political landscape surrounding immigration and national security is increasingly fraught. A recent CBS News poll indicates that while there is significant support among Republicans for Trump's deportation program, there is growing discontent among independents and Democrats regarding its implementation and impact. Many Americans are concerned about the potential for legal residents to be mistakenly deported as part of these operations. As the situation unfolds in Los Angeles, it remains clear that the clash between state and federal authorities is not merely a local issue but a reflection of broader national tensions. Newsom's defiance against federal threats, including remarks from Trump's border czar Tom Homan, signals a deepening divide. "Tom, arrest me. Let's go," Newsom challenged, emphasizing his commitment to protect the rights of Californians. Looking ahead, the dynamics between state and federal authorities will likely continue to evolve, with the potential for further legal challenges from California officials. As Governor Newsom and Mayor Bass navigate this complex landscape, the future of public safety and civil liberties in Los Angeles hangs in the balance, raising critical questions about the role of federal authority in local governance. With the specter of ongoing protests and federal interventions, California stands at a crossroads, poised to shape the national conversation on immigration and law enforcement. In a charged atmosphere marked by escalating tensions surrounding immigration enforcement, California Governor Gavin Newsom has voiced sharp criticism against President Donald Trump's recent military actions in Los Angeles. Speaking during an interview with MSNBC's Jacob Sabaroff from the Emergency Operations Center, Newsom characterized the current situation as a direct consequence of Trump's policies, stating, "Donald Trump has created the conditions you see on your TV tonight. He's exacerbated the conditions. He's putting fuel on this fire. The backdrop to Newsom's remarks is a series of protests that erupted in response to federal immigration raids in Los Angeles. These demonstrations, initially peaceful, have been marred by incidents of violence and unrest, prompting Trump to deploy roughly 2,000 National Guard troops to the city. This deployment, which Newsom and Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass have condemned as an overreach of federal authority, marks the first time in 60 years that the federal government has activated the National Guard over local objections. Newsom expressed his intention to file a lawsuit against the Trump administration and the Department of Defense, arguing that the president's actions violate both constitutional and legal norms. He's taking over the National Guard an illegal act, an immoral act, an unconstitutional act, and we're going to test that theory with a lawsuit tomorrow, Newsom asserted. He emphasized that the deployment of troops was not only unnecessary but also inflammatory, potentially exacerbating an already volatile situation. This assertion is supported by historical data suggesting that militarized responses to civil unrest often serve to escalate tensions rather than alleviate them. Research from the 1967 Kerner Commission and subsequent studies indicate that heavy-handed policing can lead to increased violence rather than de-escalation. Newsom echoed these sentiments, stating that move is purposefully inflammatory and will only escalate tensions. During the interview, Sabaroff pressed Newsom on the lack of coordination between state officials and federal enforcement regarding immigration and customs enforcement (ICE) activities. Newsom confirmed that federal authorities had not communicated with him about ongoing operations, which included reported raids on day laborers at Home Depot locations. He lamented that Trump's administration appears more focused on creating chaos than addressing the complex realities of immigration enforcement. The governor did not shy away from criticizing Trump's leadership style, calling the president a stone-cold liar for misrepresenting the safety of the situation in Los Angeles while failing to acknowledge the unrest. Newsom urged the president to stand down and rescind his order, suggesting that only then could the situation be brought under control. He remarked, "This is Donald Trump's problem right now, and if he can't solve it, we will." As tensions continue to simmer, experts warned that the militarization of protests could serve Trump's political narrative around law and order, potentially distracting from pressing issues like the economy and governance. Newsom's fiery rhetoric reflects a growing frustration among Democratic leaders regarding the federal government's approach to immigration and civil rights. Looking ahead, the aftermath of these protests and the federal response will likely shape not only the immediate political landscape but also the broader discourse on immigration policy and civil liberties in the United States. As both sides brace for potential legal battles and public backlash, the coming days will test the resilience of local governance in the face of federal authority and the ability of communities to peacefully advocate for their rights. In a dramatic escalation of tensions between California and the Trump administration, a recent CBS News poll reveals that President Donald Trump's deportation program has garnered a surprisingly positive net approval among the American public, particularly among his Republican base. However, the survey also highlights a deep divide in public sentiment regarding the specifics of the program, particularly concerning who was being targeted for deportation and the perceived safety implications. The poll, conducted just before a weekend of protests in Los Angeles, indicates that a slight majority of Americans believe the administration is primarily focusing its deportation efforts on dangerous criminals, leading to strong support for the initiative among these respondents. People feel safer with these deportation efforts, the poll suggests, aligning public perception with Trump's narrative of enhancing national security. However, this approval wanes significantly when the focus shifts away from violent offenders, revealing a complex interplay between public safety and immigration policy. Yet, as the poll underscores, the sheer number of deportations is contentious. Half of Americans feel Trump is deporting more individuals than anticipated during his 2024 campaign. Notably, this group tends to disapprove of the program, advocating instead for due process and hearings for potential deportees. This sentiment echoes a broader national trend where many Americans express concern over the administration's approach, fearing that legal residents could be mistakenly swept up in enforcement actions. Compounding the situation is a growing perception that Trump's immigration policies may negatively impact the economy. While a plurality views the deportation program as a means to bolster safety, many believe it could weaken economic stability. The divide appears to reflect long-standing attitudes toward immigrants, with those perceiving immigrants as job competitors more likely to support deportation efforts. This paradox illustrates a broader disconnect in public opinion, where approval for the goals of the program does not extend to its execution. In California, Governor Gavin Newsom has become a central figure in the unfolding drama. Openly defying threats from the Trump administration regarding potential arrests of state officials perceived to be obstructing federal immigration operations. Newsom's brash response to Tom Homan Trump's border czar highlights the escalating rhetoric as he declared, "Tom, arrest me. Let's go." This defiance underscores his growing role as a leading voice against what many perceive to be authoritarian overreach by the federal government. The political ramifications of this confrontation are significant. With Trump framing the protests as violent insurrectionist mobs, he aims to solidify support among his base by portraying Newsom and other Democratic leaders as incompetent. The governor in turn has accused the Trump administration of exploiting the situation for political gain, claiming they want chaos to further their agenda. This exchange reveals not only a clash of policies but also a battle over narrative control in a politically charged landscape. As both leaders engage in this high-stakes feud, the implications for immigration policy and state-federal relations remain uncertain. While Newsom's combative stance may resonate with his supporters, the potential for federal reprisals looms large, raising questions about the future of federal funding and support for California amid ongoing protests and unrest. Looking ahead, this confrontation may serve as a litmus test for broader national sentiments regarding immigration and state sovereignty. With the 2028 presidential race on the horizon, how Newsom navigates this conflict could significantly shape his political future. As tensions continue to rise and the nation grapples with the implications of these policies, the potential for a more significant political showdown remains. The unfolding events in Los Angeles could set the stage for the broader national discourse on immigration in the years to come. In a rapidly changing political landscape, the policies of the Trump administration are sparking intense debate and concern, particularly regarding their impact on the economy and society at large. With a focus on Maganomics, the administration's approach appears to be dismantling the progress made in various sectors, raising fears of long-term consequences. The criticisms notably articulated by Nobel Prize-winning economist Paul Krugman in a scathing commentary paint a picture of an administration that is not only economically reckless but also ideologically destructive. Krugman begins with a stark warning about the ramifications of a second Trump administration, suggesting that the ongoing transformation of American democracy, marked by increasingly authoritarian tactics, could lead to irreversible damage. He notes, "The attack on democracy and rule of law was completely predictable," indicating that the erosion of democratic norms has been a consistent theme during Trump's tenure. However, the extent of the economic damage wrought by MAGA policies has taken even seasoned observers by surprise. At the onset of 2025, America was grappling with inflation and economic discontent following the pandemic. Yet, as Krugman highlights, many indicators showed signs of resilience. Wages for workers had begun to outpace inflation and productivity was on the rise, positioning the U.S. economy as a global leader. The challenges of income inequality and deaths of despair loomed large. But an overall recovery seemed within reach until Trump's administration took the reins once more. The newly implemented Maganomics has introduced a series of policies that many economists view as deeply troubling. Chief among these are unprecedented tariff increases, particularly on imports from China. With tariffs reaching as high as 145%, Krugman argues that basic economic principles indicate such moves are bound to inflate prices and reduce household incomes. As a result, American families, particularly those in lower income brackets, are likely to bear the brunt of these policies, with projections suggesting a decline in purchasing power by as much as 7% for the most vulnerable. Moreover, Trump's approach to governance has raised significant concerns about the future of social programs. The recent budget bill proposed cuts of nearly $700 billion to Medicaid and $300 billion to food assistance programs, which could lead to millions losing access to essential services. Krugman notes that these cuts are part of a broader agenda that favors the wealthy at the expense of the poor, stating, despite these savage cuts at the bottom, taxes at the top are cut so much that the CBO estimates the budget will add $3.8 trillion to the deficit. The implications of these policies extend beyond immediate economic concerns. They are reshaping the very fabric of American society and the trust citizens place in their government. The deliberate undermining of scientific research and intellectual inquiry undercuts America's historical leadership in these domains. Funding for critical institutions like the National Institutes of Health is set to be slashed, potentially halting vital research in health and technology. This paints a bleak picture for the future of American innovation and scientific integrity. In addition to these domestic policies, Trump's administration is actively engaging in tumultuous trade negotiations with China amidst escalating tensions. Recent talks have sought to address trade imbalances, particularly concerning rare earth minerals essential for technology. As both sides jockey for position, the unpredictability of Trump's tariffs creates an environment of uncertainty that could stifle investment and economic growth. The fallout from such policies is already visible, with reports indicating significant drops in imports from China affecting supply chains and leading to rising costs for American consumers. As the political and economic landscape continues to evolve, it remains to be seen how long the American public will tolerate these aggressive policies. Krugman concludes with a sobering reminder that the damage inflicted by the current administration may have lasting effects, stating, even if MAGA is eventually driven from power, we may never go back to being the nation we were just a few months ago. The coming months will be critical for both the U.S. economy and its democratic institutions. As trade talks with China unfold and the ramifications of MAGAnomics become clearer, the need for a thoughtful and equitable approach to governance will be more important than ever. The stakes are high, and the future of America may depend on the choices made in this pivotal moment. In a dramatic escalation of tensions between state and federal authorities, California Attorney General Rob Bonta and Governor Gavin Newsom have initiated legal action against President Donald Trump and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. This lawsuit, filed on June 9, 2025, challenges Trump's controversial order to federalize the California National Guard for a period of 60 days under 10 U.S.C. Section 12406. The deployment comes amidst a backdrop of rising unrest following recent immigration raids in Los Angeles, which have sparked widespread protests. The situation escalated rapidly over the weekend, with the U.S. Department of Defense redirecting hundreds of National Guard troops from San Diego to Los Angeles without the governor's consent. An estimated 2,000 troops are expected to be deployed across the state, a move Bonta and Newsom argue is both unnecessary and unlawful. President Trump's order calling federalized National Guard troops into Los Angeles over the objections of the governor and local law enforcement is unnecessary and counterproductive, Bonta stated, asserting that the president's actions represent an abuse of federal authority. Governor Newsom echoed these sentiments, describing Trump's directive as a manufactured crisis that undermines democratic principles. Every governor, red or blue, should reject this outrageous overreach, he declared, emphasizing the potential dangers posed by federal troops operating without state oversight. Newsom's concerns stem from the fact that local law enforcement had already been managing the protests effectively, and the introduction of National Guard troops could exacerbate tensions rather than alleviate them. The legal basis for the lawsuit hinges on the assertion that the federalization of the National Guard violates the 10th Amendment, which reserves powers not delegated to the federal government for the states. Bonta and Newsom argue that the president's unilateral decision deprives California of essential resources needed to protect its citizens during emergencies. Their legal challenge also highlights that 10 U.S.C. Section 12406 mandates that the governor's consent be obtained prior to federalizing National Guard units, which did not occur in this instance. The backdrop to this showdown is a series of immigration enforcement raids conducted by U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement (ICE) in downtown Los Angeles that were met with significant public backlash and protests. The protests, which had begun peacefully, were reportedly intensified by the president's decision to deploy troops, leading to increased unrest. Critics have described the involvement of military forces in civil matters as a dangerous precedent that risks violating the Posse Comitatus Act, which prohibits federal troops from participating in civilian law enforcement. In a further escalation, the Trump administration announced the mobilization of 700 active duty Marines to Los Angeles. A defense official described this move as a provocation, suggesting that the presence of active duty forces could further inflame an already volatile situation. Experts have expressed concerns over the legality of such deployments, stating that the introduction of Marines into civilian unrest poses significant risks to both public safety and civil-military relations. This is obviously an extreme escalation that is going to pour gasoline on an already combustible situation, warned Elizabeth Goitian, a senior director at the Brennan Center for Justice. The potential for military personnel to engage with civilians raises questions about the appropriate limits of military power in domestic affairs. As protests continue across Los Angeles, the situation remains fluid. Demonstrations, while largely peaceful as of now, are being closely monitored amid fears of escalation. The legal battle initiated by Bonta and Newsom may set significant precedents regarding state versus federal authority and the role of military forces in domestic law enforcement. Looking ahead, the outcome of this legal confrontation could have lasting implications for the relationship between state and federal governments, particularly as tensions surrounding immigration and civil rights continue to unfold. With both sides digging in for a prolonged fight, the situation in California may serve as a microcosm of broader national debates over governance authority and the role of military power in civil society. In an unexpected twist during his second term, President Donald Trump appears poised to redefine U.S. foreign policy towards Iran. Recent developments indicate that a potential agreement could be in the works aimed at curbing Iran's nuclear ambitions in exchange for relief from economic sanctions. This initiative has sparked a lively debate, particularly among Democrats, about how to respond to a diplomatic approach that diverges from established Republican orthodoxy. On June 2, Axios reported that U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff presented a set of preliminary proposals to Iranian negotiators, outlining steps towards a more comprehensive agreement. Among these proposals is a plan for Iran to limit its uranium enrichment to levels sufficient solely for civilian purposes until a consortium can supply the necessary material. Such a deal could be pivotal in preventing Iran from acquiring the capability to develop nuclear weapons, thus averting the looming specter of military conflict. Matthew Duss, the executive vice president at the Center for International Policy, emphasizes the significance of these talks. If successful, this would prevent Iran from obtaining the necessary materials for a bomb and avert a potentially devastating war. This sentiment reflects a growing recognition within some Democratic circles that engaging with Trump's diplomacy could yield positive outcomes despite the complexities of the political landscape. The backdrop to these negotiations is fraught with tension. Reports indicate that talks have reached an impasse, with both sides struggling to reconcile differing views on uranium enrichment. During a recent phone call, Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu deliberated on the status of the negotiations, with Netanyahu expressing concerns over Iran's nuclear capabilities. Trump has urged caution, advising against military action while diplomatic channels remain open. "I told him this would be inappropriate to do right now because we're very close to a solution," Trump stated, underscoring the delicate balance between assertive tactics and diplomatic engagement. As the situation evolves, Iran has indicated its intention to present a counterproposal via Oman, a nation that has acted as a mediator in the ongoing discussions. Iranian officials have criticized the latest U.S. offer, claiming it fails to address key elements discussed in prior rounds. A spokesman for Iran's foreign ministry described their forthcoming proposal as reasonable, logical, and balanced, asserting that it should not be dismissed as Washington navigates this critical juncture in negotiations. Despite the apparent goodwill, a prevailing sense of skepticism lingers, especially regarding Iran's long-standing right to enrich uranium. U.S. officials have labeled this issue a red line, complicating the pathway to a successful agreement. Trump, however, remains optimistic that a robust deal could be reached, one that not only includes stringent inspections but also minimizes the risk of military confrontation. "We're having very good discussions with Iran," he remarked, suggesting that a peaceful resolution could save countless lives. As the diplomatic chess game continues, the broader implications of Trump's approach are likely to reverberate through the political landscape, prompting Democrats to reconsider their stance on foreign policy. The challenge for the party will be to navigate this evolving situation while maintaining a coherent and principled response to Trump's unorthodox strategy. Looking ahead, the coming weeks will be crucial as both sides grapple with their positions and the potential for compromise. With the stakes higher than ever, the outcome of these talks could reshape not only U.S.-Iran relations but also the dynamics of Middle Eastern geopolitics. The world watches closely as the possibility of a diplomatic breakthrough lingers on the horizon.